After centuries, Zaahen the Unsundered has finally been released, and in this skill-capped collaboration, we'll teach you everything you need to know to get started playing him. We'll break down his abilities, combos, what your main goals are throughout the match, and so much more to make you have everything you need to succeed instantly. So let's get right into it and break down how his kit works, starting with the most important part, your passive. When hitting champions with the spells or auto attacks, Zaahen will generate stacks, gaining ramping attack damage. You can go up to 12 stacks, where you will get a huge chunk of AD, letting you cut down anyone who comes close. Then, if you die while having those max stacks, you will revive after a short delay, coming back with a ton of HP. And your passive's still fully stacked, allowing you to keep dishing out absurd amounts of damage. Obviously, this is an incredibly powerful effect. So we'll be breaking down how to take advantage of it in a little while, but for now, let's move on to the rest of his kit. Your Q is a two-part auto-enhancing ability. The first activation will cause your next auto attack to strike twice, and heal you for a percentage of your max health. Then, after 1.5 seconds, you can then reactivate your Q for the second effect, making your next auto knock up the target and deal a bigger chunk of damage. Your W is sort of like a pike hook, where after a short delay, you throw out a skill shot that pulls anyone you hit and will grant you 2 passive stacks per champion hit. But unlike other hooks, Zaahen makes sure to pull everyone he hits with his W, so players will never feel safe behind minions or their tanks in a teamfight. Now, you can pull enemies over walls with W if they are standing super close by, but they literally have to be standing right next to the wall for this to work. As for your E, this is a small dash that will deal damage around you at the end. You do want to make sure though that you hit enemies with the outer edge of the slash, as you'll deal a percentage of their max health as extra damage. More importantly, can you go over walls with the E's dash? Absolutely. It may not be an insane mobility spell, but you can get around the map traveling small walls. And to wrap the kit up, your ultimate is a giant ground slam, which will deal a burst of damage when you land, while also healing you for a percentage of the damage you've dealt. A key part about this spell is that while you're in the initial cast, you will take significantly less damage, while also becoming unstoppable, letting you counter high damaging abilities or even avoid annoying crowd control spells. You should also consider waiting until you've stacked Conqueror and your passive before using your R, as you heal based on the damage it deals, which is especially strong if you're able to land it on multiple targets. And finally, that all comes with a hefty armor penetration passive, ensuring you can always threaten even the tankiest of targets. With Zaahen's abilities covered, it's fair to say that he's simple to pick up, but there's still plenty to master that can separate you from everyone else. So here's every single combo you need to learn to play Zaahen to his maximum potential. One of the most important parts about his kit is landing his W. This is because you need time to ramp up your passive, so being able to pull enemies towards you to continuously hit them is vital to your success. Not only that, but as we mentioned, hitting your W will immediately give you 2 passive stacks per champion pulled. So landing it will let you ramp up and strike players for more damage even faster. But your W has a relatively long cast time, making it easy for enemies to anticipate and avoid. Therefore, many of our combos focus on ensuring it lands consistently. First up is Q2 into W. The guaranteed knockup from your Q ensures your W lands for a lengthy CC chain. This is made even better because you can technically hold your Q2 for up to 10 seconds. After using Q1, you have 5 seconds to reactivate your Q, and then you can hold the knockup portion of the spell for 5 more seconds after that. This gives you plenty of time to look for engages by prepping your Q on a minion, then gap closing with either E or flash into Q2, followed up with W for one of the best gank setups in the entire game. Jugglers will love pathing towards your lane when you can set up kills this easily. Another great trick to ensure your W lands is by buffering it with flash, as by pressing your W before your flash, it hides the lengthy animation, helping you catch enemies off guard. Alright, so now that you can reliably land your pull, it brings us to our next combo. Your ultimate, like your W, can be a little tricky to land, since the animation gives your opponent time to react. To maximize your chances of landing it, try casting R immediately after your W, as this will make it impossible for your opponents to walk out in time, letting you deal damage and heal reliably. However, you don't always want to use your R right after W. Its value isn't just in the damage, as remember, it also heals you, grants CC immunity, and can even act as a gap closer. So always look to get maximum value out of it whenever you can. While the combos we've covered thus far are relatively easy to pull off, this next one requires requires a lot of practice, and will be reserved for only the most dedicated of Zaahen mains. Experienced players will already know how you can use Flash to extend the range of abilities, like Gragas's Body Slam and Shen's Taunt. For Zaahen though, if you try to flash during your E, you'll instead cancel the slash and do no damage unless you know the perfect timing. To get this combo to work, you need to E and then wait until right before the slash animation is about to go off before flashing. This is an extremely tight timing, so you should definitely practice this before attempting it in a real game, but it will be an extremely useful combo for catching enemies off guard, since it will be a rare combo that doesn't get used very often due to its difficulty. Now that you've got a good grasp on what Zaahen's abilities do and how to combo them properly, let's break down your playstyle and what your goals are throughout all stages of the game. Zaahen is going to be quite the difficult bruiser to go up against, especially in long-lasting fights. You excel in engagements that go on for a while, where you can fully stack up your passive, giving you a ton of DPS and the revive to keep you going no matter what. And that's if your opponents can even proc your revive, since your ultimate is a super strong damage reduction and heal. All of these strengths do come with a catch though. Zaahen struggles in shorter engages, where you're only at 6 to 10 passive stacks, and you're having a hard time getting to that full 12. This is especially true in the early game, since your E and W have fairly long cooldowns, making it hard to stick on someone to keep auto-attacking. Which brings us to one of the most important interactions you need to know about Zaahen's kit. As we briefly mentioned in regards to your W, all of Zaahen's spells will generate passive stacks based on how many enemies you've hit. So, landing multi-champion Ws, Es, and Rs in fights can let you stack up your passive instantly, meaning that in grouped up fights, it's much easier to fully stack up, and that's where your main strength as a champion will be. And so you should be looking to play for these larger scale fights throughout most of the game. But the game starts at level 1. In top lane, where you'll be in an isolated 1v1. Although Zaahen shines in larger scale fights, you have to play the lane phase out first. So let's cover exactly how to dominate most matchups. In a 1v1, you will definitely struggle to ever fully stack up your passive, unless your opponent is just standing there letting you hit them for free. Likewise, your passive will only stay up if you're actively hitting an enemy champion. You can't maintain passive stacks by attacking minions like you can on champions such as Aurelia or Jax. So during the laning phase, your playstyle shifts dramatically because you won't be able to reliably reach max stacks. Rather than trying to all in, you'll be playing a more spacing-oriented style, where you weave in and out of trades with your Qs and Es. For a quick skill cap tip, remember that auto-enhancing abilities always extend your auto attack range, and understanding this is a huge part of being a good top lane player on any champion. Zaahen benefits tremendously from this, since he's got 2 activations on his Q, similar to Camille. Typically, throughout the game, what you want to do on Zaahen is use your Q's auto attack resets to weave in more autos, allowing you to stack your passive as quickly as possible. But during the laning phase, which is more so about quick trades when you deal damage and get out, you may want to forego the auto reset. Instead, using the extra range to sneak and harass with Q auto attacks while your opponent goes for CS is a great way to get in free damage while spacing out the enemy laner. With a low mana cost on your Q, you should be able to threaten this type of harass constantly. And if your opponent tries to fight back as you harass them, you can immediately try and disengage the fight by using W to disrupt their engage and using your E to then space them out. Remember, your Q1 restores a fair amount of HP as well, so winning through attrition by constantly spamming Q trades will be Zaahen's main goal in most lanes. Then, once you've got a health lead, you can start going for much more aggressive fights where you can E forward and try to extend the fight with your W, pulling them back so you can then whack them down. And that should be your basic game plan in most matchups. Use your Q and E to space out your opponents to slowly build a health lead, and then go in for the kill by utilizing your passive to get a ton of value in all-in fights. But a great tip against certain champions where it might be difficult to go for your standard Q harass game plan is to start E at level 1 instead, as you can utilize the dash to get some free harass while also gaining early control over the wave. And on the topic of your E, there's a very important mechanic you should know. You can control exactly how far you dash with the spell, which is relevant since the damage part of your E only comes out at the end of your dash. This means that a full range E is going to take a while to deal damage. On the other hand, dashing in place will deal damage instantly. This actually lines up perfectly with Zaahen's 175 auto attack range. since that's about the range at which your E will deal its outer edge damage. Combining this concept with your Q2 will lead to an especially strong trading combo, as you can knock them up, then dash in place for a super fast and smooth trade. Now that you've got a good idea of how to dominate the laning phase consistently, let's break down the most important part of the game for Zaahen, grouped up fights, as this is where your champion truly shines. In skirmishes or team fights, as a bruiser, your main goal will always be to score kills on carries and to deal a lot of damage, of course. But Zaahen can get a ton of value out of his kit in teamfights by simply buying time for the rest of his allies. With your Revive passive, alongside your ultimate's absurd damage reduction and healing, it takes a long time to take you down. And in that time, your teammates have likely killed the enemy frontline, whereas you're still alive and brawling. But this only works if you can actually stack your passive before you die. So let's break down how to approach different types of situations. In League, there's generally two types of fights that you'll see. There's those clumped up messes where everyone is piled on top of each other and no one knows what's going on, and then there's those scattered types of fights where everyone left their ADCs to fend for themselves and it's just a bunch of little fights everywhere, right? As Zaahen, you will approach these situations entirely differently. So let's start with the clumped up fight scenario. This is the ideal type of fight for Zaahen. As we've discussed, all of his abilities grant stacks of his passive per champion hit. So you can ramp up your damage and prepare your revive nearly instantly in a fight if you just throw all your spells into a group of enemy players. Basically, in clumped up fights, you shouldn't be afraid of just pressing all your spells into the clump. As long as you can stack your passive, it doesn't matter if you don't get the perfect value out of your abilities. You just need to get your revive ready. And that's because of a key detail we discussed earlier, where you revive at full stacks of your passive. So once everyone in the clump is starting to die and disperse, you're reviving and coming back with over 400 AD, ready to clean up everyone who survived. Now let's talk about the more scattered types of fights you'll encounter. In these types of engages, it's very important you don't tunnel vision on just running at enemy carries. All of Zaahen's strengths do come with the downside that you will have a hard time sticking to elusive targets. Zaahen can get kited rather easily, especially while everyone still has flashes and their ultimates available. In those scattered engagements, you should instead play on the side of the fight where there's an enemy frontliner who is likely trying to get to your carries. Rather than diving in, focus on hitting the enemy frontline and helping to peel your teammates with your Q's knockup if needed. You do a lot of damage, so you're helping take down the enemy frontline faster, but more importantly, you're giving yourself a target dummy to stack your passive on. Then, once you've got your passive fully or nearly stacked, you can look at the rest of the fight. You can even consider prepping your Q on the enemy frontliner and then trying to surprise a carry with one of those combos we mentioned earlier, such as W flash, Q2, and then E and R as needed to burst a squishy carry down. All that's left to cover is how to properly build Zaahen, so you can optimize each match as much as possible, allowing you to take advantage of Zaahen's insane damage potential. For your skill order, you're maxing Q as your main spell, E, then W, and obviously prioritizing your R. As for your runes, you will be defaulting to Conqueror in most of your games. This is due to how Zaahen's passive works. Because his passive gives you % based AD, you will literally have a 50% stronger Conqueror than every other champion in the game. Needless to say, that is a very powerful interaction, and you will be dealing insane damage with your passive and Conqueror fully stacked. However, there may be times where you want to forego the extra power later and instead play for lane with Grasp of the Undying. Grasp can be quite helpful in matchups where you'll be trading aggressively constantly, and does pair quite well with your Q harass playstyle we discussed earlier. That being said, we would recommend running Conqueror most games since it has such a powerful synergy with your kit. As for your items, your core build will be Trinity Force into Sundered Sky. It should be no surprise that Trinity pairs perfectly with Zaahen, as he has two auto-enhancing effects with his Q. And alongside Trinity Force's proc, Sundered Sky's auto crit pairs quite well with Zaahen, as you can shred carries later into the game with a single Q, dealing absurd damage instantly. As for your core build, you can adapt and rush Stridebreaker instead of Trinity if you're against elusive champions who you will have a hard time sticking on to. This is highly recommended versus ranged top laners who will look to kite you, so Stride into Sundered Sky will be ideal in those matchups. After your two core items, you will be adapting based on the game that you're in. and you're mostly looking for items that can help you survive until you get 12 stacks of your passive in fights. Death's Dance, Starax, Titanic, and Ravenous Hydra, along with Spirit Visage, are all great options. That being said, there are some unique item interactions you should know about so you can take advantage of Zaahen's unique scaling. Overlord's Bloodmail specifically has a ton of value on Zaahen because its passive grants you bonus attack damage based on how much AD you have. And since Zaahen is able to stack a crazy amount of total attack damage, he gets better value out of this Overlord's passive than any other champ in the game. Therefore, Bloodmail is one of the strongest damage items you can buy later into the match. That being said, Zaahen already deals a ton of damage, so utility bruiser items that help you get to 12 stacks reliably might be a bit more consistent to build if you're having survivability problems. And the best item to achieve this, without a doubt, is Guardian Angel. Zaahen has an extremely powerful interaction with GA, where you retain your passive stacks as you're coming back to life. So you can go into fights much more aggressively, respawn with GA, then come back to finish stacking your passive and have another revive ready to go. The double revive stasis is also perfect for helping you buy time for your team to kill the enemy front line, while your opponents have to go through 2 or 3 of your lives before you finally go down. Alright, and that is everything you need to know to get started playing Zaahen effectively. We hope you find immediate success in your first few games, and we'll see you next time.